a causal framework for explaining the predictions of black box sequence-to-sequence models. At that time, the interpretability has been approached primarily from two main angles. Model interpretability, which is to try to understand what the model itself is constructed and understand the internal mechanisms of the models. As we know, this is very hard because neural models are very hard to interpret themselves. And the prediction interpretability, which is to try to figure out an a posteriori explanation for the behaviors of the model. This can be done by assuming the model is a black box and is relatively easier and more practical. This paper follows the second approach. How do they interpret the predictions of the sequence-to-sequence models? They try to figure out the influence of the input tokens to the output tokens by constructing a graph and refining this graph. So the algorithms contain two steps. The first one is to construct the dependency graph. The graph is constructed as following. The dependency graph is displayed as the left-hand side. Each input token is displayed as a blue node, and the output token is displayed as the red node. And there are a lot of edges between those nodes showing the influence from the input to the output. They computed this graph from a variational autoencoder. So how the variational autoencoders were set up sort of guarantees that the perturbations of the input does not affect too much the output. So the variational autoencoder graph is relatively robust. Okay, that was the first step. And for the second step, they try to refine this graph and partition that into several subsets. Because each of the input can be connected to multiple output, and the resulting dependency graph is not very clear. So they refined it by a partitioning algorithm. So they output this explanation graph. For experiments, they ran the sequence-to-sequence explanation on machine translation, dialogue systems, and the bias detection in parallel corpora. So this framework is model agnostic. It takes the model as a black box and does not care about what this model actually is constructed. And it takes in the input and output of the model and construct an a posteriori explanation. This approach is followed by a lot of subsequent works in from 2018 to 2020.